Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Kyle Richey on the line. Kyle, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great. You do some amazing work. So why don't you share with the audience some of the work that you're doing, and we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah. So I guess the best thing I'm known for is an app called Strides. It's for tracking your progress on goals and habits. And then I'm all about progress. I guess I have makeprogress.com as well, which is a newsletter and a course for goal setting.
I'm a big fan of goal setting, and I find that if you write them down and follow them and have them where you can see them, you're going to be more motivated and reminded to work on them, because in life, especially during a pandemic, there's so many things that are grabbing our attention that we get pulled away from what we want to do. We get kind of, I don't want to say sucked in, but we do. We get sucked into elections and new presidents and the news and the pandemic and all these other things that are going on. And it takes us off course. And for me, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing for me, for my business, for my personal life, relationships, all of that? I stay in those lanes. Doesn't mean I'm ignoring what's going on in the world, but it means if I stay on my road, then the path to where I want to get to, I'm more likely going to get to it instead of pulling off at the side and looking and seeing, okay, what's going on in the world kind of thing.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah, I actually called the goal setting course On the Right Path for that very reason, because it's focusing on values and prioritization and kind of, sorting and filtering things a little bit, and then, figuring out what matters to you most. And then, you can still pay attention, like you said, to other things. You don't have to be completely oblivious to everything, but it's a lot easier to focus, I find, when you have a clear perspective on the values and the things kind of driving, the foundational stuff. That helps so much.
So why did you launch the business? Whenever I talk with authors or business leaders that created a business, many of them, of course, left a 9-to-5 or some type of job to launch something. So what motivated you to do it?
So I was wrapping up an engineering degree, systems engineering, in 2008. So it was kind of at the bottom of that recession, and it was most of the people in that industry were going into manufacturing, and that was one of the hardest hit industries. So I just kind of saw the writing on the wall as I was wrapping up and thinking about getting internships and stuff. And I was like, well, I had been building some websites in college. And so I thought, let me just see if I can make this work instead. And fast forward a couple of years, I've actually working full time on it after senior design projects, everything wrapped up in graduation, and barely making anything in the beginning. I just didn't ever get a full time job. I just kind of slowly built things up and kind of lived lean and kept things frugal and simple. And slowly but surely built the web business up. And then the App Store had come out as well. And so I started kind of dabbling in some apps as well, and then ended up selling all my websites, my web businesses, and completely shifted over to the focus of the software and applications. And Strides was the big one. I built 6 or 7 different things, but that was the one that I liked the whole time. Started it back in 2011. So it's been about 9.5 years or so. And it was really just a scratch your own itch kind of thing. I just wanted an app to track goals and habits. I couldn't find anything. And, I love to-do list apps. I like calendar apps and note-taking apps and all these, but I just couldn't find something to zoom out a little bit and have that bigger picture. And so, it resonated with people, and I just kind of gradually improved it and, I was actually rolling the revenue and all the profit of it back into the business to develop faster from the very beginning. And then once I sold the web businesses, I needed an income again. so I started taking a little bit of a cut from it. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun just building it up and improving it.
You said a couple of things that jumped out at me. Number one, back in the Great Recession of 2008, how so many businesses were launched during that very difficult time. Yeah. And it reminds me of, what we're facing, during, 2020 and 2021 with this pandemic, where I'm excited and optimistic to see, what product launches are going to be birthed out of this time frame, because we know, so many things like your product, for example, is great. I love the fact that it's a higher level view of all these connection things. Because I actually had an interview the other day with somebody that works in the IT field, and they're a consultant and whatnot, and they were talking about Microsoft and G Suite and how those ecosystems are starting. They're a lot better than they used to be. Go back years with Microsoft, it's like everything was disjointed. It was like it kind of worked together, but it really didn't. And now there's an effort to say, okay, here's a system where you can see everything and see how everything connects. And your software does that from a goal setting and to-do list and all of these other things. Because again, one of the things with habits, and this, and hopefully the people that are listening know this, but if not, well, here's it goes. Habits are difficult to implement. They take time, and the more barriers, whether they're self barriers or tech barriers or just life barriers that get in the way, the less likely you're going to implement that habit, whether it's trying to lose weight, exercise, cut back on screen time, whatever the case may be. So if you have systems like, your product that makes it easier, the likelihood of somebody actually implementing something they want to do is easier because there's not as many hurdles. And because then you get frustrated. You're like, it's like, this isn't working. And then you stop, and then that's that. So I'm glad that you had, the insight to say, okay. And again, you birthed this out of something that you're like, I'm not finding out there what I need, so I'm going to develop it. I'm going to make it myself. And, it was the same thing for me and the burnout prevention work that I do. I was the first client, was myself, because I had my own burnout journey, recovered from it. And like, I don't ever want to do that again. What do I need to do in order to prevent that? Looked around, see the same stuff pretty much everybody was saying, but there wasn't any concrete, what are some steps I can do? What's the map? What's the roadmap? What are the systems that I need to implement in my life to make sure that I recognize the signs of burnout and make sure that I don't even approach burnout again? And after doing that, I was like, okay, now looking around, even to this day, there's more people talking about it, but still not a lot of like concrete, easily to implement solutions. Everybody says, well, do this and this and this. And it's like, okay, great. Someone may have zero interest in taking up yoga or meditation. Right. Just may not do it. I don't recommend it. I'm not against it by any stretch, but I don't recommend it. It's like, okay, do this, because there are some people, especially executives that I work with, getting those individuals to just sit down is not an easy thing to do, because that's how they're wired. They're just constantly driven and going, and just having them relax. It's like, okay, well, then we got to approach this in a different way. Because if I'm telling you to do something that you physically cannot do right now, that's like asking, me to say, okay, go outside and build a rocket ship and compete with SpaceX. Not going to happen. It's not going to work. If I get 2 feet off the ground, I'll be shocked, and then it'll blow up, and then that'll be it. But so I'm not going to do that. I'll leave that to the experts to create the ships that don't blow up and get the payload and people up into space and all that good stuff. So. Again, so talk to me about with the clients you've used or the clients you have and people that have used the software. What are some things that they've gained from this, and some of the feedback that you get from people that's obviously made the product better?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things, there's 4 different ways to track things, 4 different tracker types. And so a lot of things are just like a habit tracker, and habit is literally a quarter of strides. And so it's a huge one. It's a really important one. I was going to say too, I really liked the article you read. You were talking about how rather than just doing yoga or meditation, there was something about choosing like 2 to 3 things per week that you can do. Could be hobbies, could be just time to relax, could be something really important with family, whatever it may be. And that's a really common thing that people do in it. And I got a lot of feedback from people that they liked the day, week, and month and year options, being able to say, like, I want to do this many times per, period. And so what I did was I created one called the average tracker, which is the same kind of thing, but instead of doing like checking a box and said I did it once, or I didn't do it, you can actually type in a number. So you can say like, I want to sleep at least 7.5 hours a night, or I want to average this much revenue per month, or that kind of thing. And so people really like that. And so I kept expanding on it and made it so there could be things that are like, lower is better. So I want to average this many calories or fewer per day and stuff. So it just slowly kind of built on it. And there's one called Target where you can set like a specific goal date and then choose a start value and goal value. And the coolest thing is it'll track your pace. And so there's a little pace line on the progress bar. And so it'll tell you green or red, are you on track or not to achieve your goal on time? And that was one of the biggest ones, because people love they love seeing, like, whether it's a project or a target, they love seeing like being red, like it's just right there, it's right below the pace. And then they make some progress today, and then boom, it just goes from red to green. And they're like, all right, sweet. It almost feels like you achieve the goal each day that happens instead of just achieving it at the very end, which it was a huge takeaway. It wasn't something I really like intended in the beginning, but that was something that was really fun to see. And I see that myself all the time. I create project trackers and things where I'm working on stuff and I'm like, oh, I'm a little behind. And then I get on pace and I feel like I just knocked it all out when I'm really 40% of the way done or something with the project. So that's been a really, really powerful, positive motivator to keep going.
It makes a lot of sense, especially when people see they're in red, but they look at the green where they can get to and they go, can I do that? Mm-hmm. And they go, yes. And they say, okay, let me just do this. Whether it's, we'll say something as simple as getting 10,000 steps, and, they look at, a tracker and they go, okay, well, I'm at 8640. Okay. Can I, get another 1,300 steps in? All right, let me walk around, my condo complex another, couple times, or let me do this. And then they get there and they go, okay, I accomplished something. And a lot, I've heard the phrase gamify things, and it's competition with yourself in a way, but it's also a competition of just like, okay, I want to get better. There's a reason when people download, these types of apps or systems, is because they want to improve. They want to make a positive adjustment in their life, and having tools, again, like yours, that make it really easy and intuitive to use, that can have, the thing is, it has a ripple effect on their life. It's like, okay, great. So I established these better habits, and great. Okay, now I'm doing those things. Yes, but the ripple effect of doing those things make you healthier, happier, less stressed. That has such a huge impact on every aspect of your life, not just feeling better and having a better digestive system and sleeping better and just being a happier individual. Mm-hmm. Everyone around you benefits from that. Not only family and loved ones, but people you work with, albeit remotely now, but still they notice there's a difference, and your productivity level will improve, and you won't be as stressed about certain things. And all of a sudden life flows. And that's one of the things I've noticed, obviously, with myself and teams that I've worked with and individuals, is when you capture that flow of life, and where life is flowing, and it doesn't feel like jagged edge type of living, but literally just navigating through your days and having moments of, okay, I'm going to work on this today, or these are the 2 or 3 things I want to do this week, and doing those, you really feel in control, and you're like, okay, wow, this is great. And it just helps improve, and it keeps you focused, because, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many distractions that we can get off. It's kind of like a dog seeing a squirrel. We could be going about our business, doing whatever. We see a squirrel, all bets are off. We're chasing it, going after it, and all of that kind of good stuff. And I have a dog, so I know what that looks like. Same thing with us. We get distracted. We see a news alert. It's like, or this, or if you're a stock market trader, all the things that have been going on in the stock market for the past few days. And it's like, what's going on with all of that? It takes your attention off of what you need to be focusing on. And that's why systems like, and apps like you have, really make a big difference in keeping people accountable to themselves. And I think that's such a big thing that I think often gets overlooked with all of these apps that people download to improve their lives.
I agree. And I want to mention one thing before I forget. This made me think of something specifically related to burnout. I think one thing that a lot of people I've noticed, based on feedback and kind of quantitative stuff and some qualitative conversations, I've talked to, I think, 15,000 people. I've done all the email ever since I started the company, and I never outsourced that or anything. And it's given me a lot of, a good taste of how people really like see it and feel about it. And one of the things I've noticed is that people are hesitant to adjust. And I think like if you get kind of lost in the weeds and you don't realize that this is one little patch of weeds next to one tree that's in a giant forest, and don't see the forest from the trees and zoom out a little bit, it's really easy to, for instance, think that like, oh, that goal I set 2 months ago, that's my goal. It's like, it's up to you, unless it's some, like you said, a board of directors or something. We talked about that before the call, like that. I mean, if it's somebody, top down pressure, okay, maybe, you might be able to not adjust that goal date or the quarterly target or whatever it is. But in a lot of cases, it's something personal, and you can just choose to adjust your expectations. My wife loves to say, when you're stressed, do less. And I love that. Like it's so easy to like get in this vicious cycle where you start to, build on it and say like, the only way out is through. I just have to push through this, and next week it'll be easier. And then before you know it, you're burnt out and everything is crazy, And so yeah, I just wanted to say it's a really important thing to be able to adapt a little bit. And if you start to feel things are slipping, or you're not in that smooth control, it starts to become that jagged edge. It's important just to change the goal if you can. If it's in your power to do it, then just lower it a little bit, even if just for temporarily. Just do it just for long enough to feel like you can break that cycle and get your life back in your control. So I like having flexibility with an app,
that makes a lot of sense. And I love that if you're stressed, do less. That's so critical. And I've seen so many people that I've worked with that were on the path to burnout. And so I'm just going to work through it. And I say, no, that's not, you don't work harder. That's not going to do it. That's pouring gasoline on a fire. That's not going to work. What you need to do is take a step back and look. And you just mentioned something about adjusting your goals. Your goals. You can adjust them however you want. So if your goal is, I want to lose 20 pounds this year, and if you're struggling with it, and of course, I always find it ironic that, especially in so many climates, New Year's resolutions start in January 1st, and a good chunk of the country, has winter, and our bodies naturally are going, hey, it's cold. I need to store things. So we're so here we are trying to lose weight January 1st. And, it's, we're going up against a brick wall, and we're like, how come we're not losing anything? It's well, because your body's going, hey, we want to, we need the energy to store up, because have you been outside? It's cold. And we need some extra insulation. So it's one of those things where I tell people, it's like, okay, if you're going to do that, plan for the year, but recognize that the first 3 months, you may or may not have the success. You may want to say, you know what, I'm going to lose this, but I'm going to start implementing some healthier habits in January, but I'm not going to necessarily weigh myself until April. Just start with the little habits, or say, okay, instead of 20 pounds, say I want to lose 5 pounds. Implement the same habits. And with activity and things like that, and eating the right foods for you, then the weight will come off. And I always remind people too, especially if they're trying to lose a lot of weight, it's like, look, you didn't put all that weight on in 2 months. You're certainly not going to lose it in 2 months, or at least keep it off. I mean, you could do, what, boxers and, MMA fighters do to cut weight and all that stuff. They drink some things and all of a sudden they lose a bunch of water weight. And it's like, sure, congratulations. But guess what? Tomorrow you're going to wake up and it's all going to be back. It's like, you don't want that. So, the sustainable changes, there's things that you get implement over time. So that's, I love the fact that, that the app does that. So someone downloads, your app. What are some things that they should be focusing on first to do it? Because I know there's a lot of things in it, but what are some things that they should, really focus on first to ease into things, depending on obviously what they need to do?
Yeah, I really like the idea of almost looking at it like kind of a 2x2, like a little matrix. There are things that are new to you, and there are things that are old, or things that you've done for a long time, right? There are things that are hard, and there are things that are easy. And if you kind of look at all those, I like to kind of balance those 4 squares. So, for instance, for me, like drinking water is no big deal. I don't know why. I've never had some people I talk to are like, I can't drink 3 glasses of water in a day if I try, and I need 10 reminders. And for me, I drink 6 every day, and right. But for me, I barely remember it, like this kind of thing. Or sorry, for me, I always remember it. And so like these kind of things, like where if you feel like something's super, super easy, I think that's a really important thing to keep track of, to feel like that's under control, to recognize it's not like everything's out of control. I'm not behind pace or off track or confused or feeling like something is, difficult or uphill battle with everything I'm doing. So it's important, I think, to have like an easy win, I guess is what I'm saying. Another thing, though, I think, is to have something that's a challenge, kind of an audacious, really inspiring kind of goal. And that's usually something I would do that's long term. So I like to have one thing that's like a daily habit that's just an easy, I probably do it every time anyway. I'm just going to get that easy win. And then one thing that's kind of hard longer term. And then a couple things in the middle, things that are, maybe they're a newer behavior, but it's not that hard. Like one example, I know I talked to someone, it was, obviously you don't want to start out with like a Navy SEAL fitness training regimen if you haven't worked out in 10 years, right? But if you've been playing sports all your life and you're really into that kind of stuff and you've just kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit and you want to get back into it, exercise may be an easy thing for you, but what you choose is really important. So having a couple medium things where it's like it's a maybe an existing behavior, but it's a little bit challenging, or it's a brand new behavior, but it's a really low level, easy version of it. And so I like to kind of cover those. And that's a really good starting point, because if you have if you cover that spectrum, it's a lot easier to feel good the whole time, because you're more likely to succeed with at least 2 or 3 of those 4 things. And then the hard one is such a long time frame. You're not going to feel on a given, daily basis that it's like, oh, I messed up today. And that's the whole problem, right? You can catch up, So I think it's good just to kind of set yourself up, kind of tee yourself up for success from the beginning in that way. And then over time, you can kind of, build on it, add more things.
I love the analogy you just said. It's like, there's setbacks in things, and you're going to have good days. You're going to have challenging days, just like in professional sports. You don't win every game.
Right.
If you're like, unless you're like Coach K at Duke, you win majority of your games.
Right.
I was thinking, just completely derailed the conversation just for a second. I was thinking about him for some reason. He came to mind, and how, he's been the coach at Duke since the 80s. And I'm like, doing the math there, I'm going, I don't like that math, because I was, a teenager in the 80s, and now we're, where we are now, going, yeah, that's a pretty big gap. It's like, but wait a minute, Coach K has been at Duke that whole time. And it's one of those things where in his situation, time and time again, systems go implement, you win some games, you lose some games and things like that. But the consistency is there. And with habit tracking and things like that, you'll get consistent with it if you put the time into it. And it's going to feel funny at first if you haven't been doing it, but you get into the habit of things, and then it'll become as automatic as all the routine habits you have in the morning or when you go to bed. There's things that many of us do that we have done forever, and you just add those things to it, and it makes such a huge difference in your life. And in having, a tool like yours to be able to guide them in a way that is intuitive but easy to use, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, that's been a big focus. I from the very start, I was kind of targeting. I remember the Simon Sinek, he has that like the innovation curve thing that he talks about, and it was targeting early adopters in the beginning for sure. It was just the people who were willing to just try anything, wanted all the kind of geeking out, they wanted all the flexibility and control and all the settings you could imagine. But I didn't want it to be bloated and complicated. Like I didn't want it to be like a Photoshop kind of app where you open it up and there's just like toolbars everywhere and a million buttons and 100 fields for every option, And so I tried to keep it as simple as I could for development, but also more importantly for the user experience. And so simple yet flexible has kind of been the guiding principle, the North Star the whole time. And I think one of the most interesting things too is that once people get into it for a while, there are people who, like, I have probably 15 to 20 things that I track each day that kind of come up as due today. Some are goals, some are habits, some are easy wins, some are more challenging things, projects, that kind of thing. But there are people, like I just talked to someone who had 72 trackers. I've talked to people that have over 100. Some people track, like there was one that was a personal trainer that has like 200 or 300 trackers, because they track all the different exercises and 1 rep maxes and things for all their clients. So they have, 20 or 30, trackers for each of their clients and stuff. So it's really cool to think that like that can still expand and kind of scale for people, but it's definitely good to start with just a few, and then build over time, like you said. So.
Yeah, the takeaway from this is don't line up with 200 things to track. That's all you're going to be doing is tracking things instead of doing things. It's like start really small, add accordingly, and you'll make a big difference. But that's a great way for them to keep track of things, for their clients as well, to use it in that type of thing as, kind of a CRM type of system, as well. It's just really innovative of that person to be able to do that. So, Kyle, I've loved our conversation today. Where can people find out more about you, this wonderful app, and everything else you're doing?
Thanks, me too. So stridesapp.com is the website for the app itself, and then makeprogress.com is kind of like my portfolio site. So.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Kyle, thanks again for all the work that you're doing, and congratulations and continued success.
Thanks. Okay, you too.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.